Okay, it's Thursday here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know, the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and YouTube right here. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the YouTube channel. We put out video content on the reg. Daily Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We do that every morning like this one. You get it right there at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And live streams like the one we did last night, 8:30 p.m. every week, every Wednesday night. 8:30 p.m. every Wednesday night, we get together to talk about Pitt sports in a live stream where you can comment and ask questions, and we can have a little interaction back and forth. It's a lot of fun. And then any other videos we might do, post-game press conferences, interviews, highlights, practice, a special live stream if some news breaks or something like that. There's lots of things that we can do right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss any of it, so make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can turn on notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone anytime we post a new video or anytime we go live, anytime we do anything here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you can get a notification about it. So like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate that, and then you won't miss anything that we do. So you don't want to miss out, right? Yesterday I talked a lot about the transfer portal, talked about the relatively low number of guys that Pitt had go into the portal this year. Only 12 players, by my count, 12 departures, 12 players have gone, 12 players from the 2022 roster, scholarship players, have gone into the transfer portal so far. Grad transfers, I think, can still go. There's a question about that. I haven't really gotten a clear answer, but I believe grad transfers can still go. But in terms of undergrad scholarship players, that's it. Those are all the guys that you're going to see go into the portal. It's effectively closed. If you want to play in the fall, you need to be in the portal by now, or else you're not going to. So yesterday we talked about how it was a relatively low number, talked about why that might be, why Pitt has largely retained its roster and has been able to hold on to guys and all that kind of thing. Today, though, I mean, just as I continued talking about the transfers from this past year, and the guys who, and sort of thinking about the transfers from the 2021 roster and then the transfers from the 2022 roster, I started thinking about who's Pitt going to miss the most. Like this year's transfer departures, there's no Jordan Addison on the list. That guy isn't out there. The major star player who really is the difference between wins and losses. They didn't lose that guy. But they lost 12 players, 12 scholarship guys, and I thought we could count them down, 12-1, on who they're going to miss the most, whose departure hurts the most, who could help them the most in 2023 if they'd stuck around. And the list, just kind of going offense to defense to special teams, this is the list, and then we'll go through the ranking. Keaton Slovis, Vincent Davis, Jaden Bradley, Jalen Barden, Gavin Thompson, Miles Alston, Kai Wright, John Morgan, Sam Williams, Khalil Anderson, Judson Tallender, and most recently, punter Sam Vanderhaar. So, 12 guys. How would we rank them? Who's going to hurt the most? Who's going to hurt the least? Let's go 12-1 with the hurting the least, working all the way up to hurting the most. And number 12, hurting the least, I'm going to say Gavin Thompson. No disrespect to Gavin Thompson, but he was a former walk-on who went on scholarship, never really made an impact in the receiving game. And you could say that about Miles Alston as well, but I think Miles Alston was a better player, had a higher ceiling than Thompson. So I would say Thompson, probably number 12. Good luck to him. I think he went to UNLV. Hopefully that works out well for him. Number 11, Sam Williams, a defensive end who never really played. I don't know if he ever got a snap at Pitt. He transferred to Murray State. Just kind of looking him up real quick. I don't know that he ever played in a game at Pitt. Let's check his. He did not play in any games in 2021, did not play in any games in 2020, and there are no career statistics available for him. I guess he wasn't even on the roster in 2022. He departed, so he's gone. And defensive end depth I think is solid. We'll talk more about it as we move through this list because there's another defensive end on this list. But Charlie Partridge does a great job. I think they do a great job recruiting defensive linemen. Partridge does a great job coaching up defensive linemen, but you're not going to hit on 100% of the guys you take. And Sam Williams would be one of the guys that they did not hit on. So good luck to him at Murray State. Number 10, Sam Vanderhaar. Obviously, look, I've said this before. When I talked about Vanderhaar deciding to go into the transfer portal, I said, no, he was not very good last year as a freshman. I mean, he struggled, didn't even know the rules at certain points, didn't know the rules of the game, and nothing worked the way it was supposed to work. The punting game was a disaster. And I'm surprised it didn't cost them games. But I thought he could improve. I use the example of Kirk Christodoulou. First of all, Kirk Christodoulou didn't play as a freshman. He redshirted. He sat for a year behind, I think it was Ryan Winslow at that point. And then his redshirt freshman year, 2018, he wasn't very good. At least he struggled early on. Got a little bit better as the season went on, but then became pretty solid for the next 3 years. Was a pretty good punter, even, I would say, for the next 3 years. A reliable player at that position. So I thought with Sam Vanderhaar, he had a really rough freshman year, but he could get better. I mean, there was that whole ambidextrous, he can punt with both legs. I think there were more strategic things they might be able to do with that, and more strategic things they might be able to do with the rollout punting and whatnot. But he was just such a mess on the field, and the whole operation was such a mess that, I don't think they ever got a chance to really fully explore and effectively explore the possibilities that were there. And then, so he never got a chance to really develop and become whatever he potentially could become. But then they have two other guys in Caleb Junko and Jeff Yerk. Yerk, of course, transferring in from Elon, who, they look better. They look better. I said this yesterday that we only watch a few things in spring camp and training camp too in August. The first 5 periods of practice, one of those periods is stretching. One of those periods is Panthers giving the team a pep talk, and one of those periods is punting. Typically, almost every day we watch the full punting period, so we see these guys kick. And one thing that Caleb Junko and Jeff Yerk did consistently this spring is they punted the ball into the rafters of the indoor facility. Now that's the kind of thing that guys like Adam Gressel and Ryan Winslow used to do all the time. They would punt the ball up there, you'd watch it go up, and it would hit one of the light fixtures or get stuck in the rafters or something like that. And you knew that was a big punt. That was a big kick. And I don't remember ever seeing Sam Vanderhaar do that. And Cam Guess, to a certain extent, another one of the backup punters. But watching them this spring, Caleb Junko and Jeff Yerk did it pretty often. Pretty consistently. So much so that Panthers said they were glad to get outside for a practice or two because they could actually punt and not have the ball hit the ceiling. That's a good kick. That's a big leg to put the ball up there. And Yerk and Junko have that. And so I don't see Vanderhaar as a huge loss because I think they've got two good punters. And Yerk is experienced. Junko obviously punted quite a bit in the final few games of the season last year. So I don't even think they're giving up much in the way of experience moving on to one of those two guys. One of them will get the starting punting job, and I'm guessing will go on scholarship because the scholarship spot opens with Vanderhaar transferring. But I don't think it's a huge loss because I think they should be able to replace him with one of those guys. Number 9, I have Kai Wright. And Kai Wright really never showed anything at Pitt, never really did much. I mean, he came out, playing small school football at Farrell, was a do-everything player, played both sides of the ball. Thought he might be a linebacker at Pitt. He ends up playing like tight end. And I only put him ahead of Vanderhaar, Williams, and Thompson because they've got some bodies at tight end, but I think they could use, if Kai Wright could ever play up to his ability, I think he could have been a useful player. Maybe not a game-changing player, but a useful player. And he could have had a role, a little bit of, moving around and adjusting, doing some different things. He transferred to James Madison And I hope he gets an opportunity there because I think he is a good big athlete. You know, I think he's a big athlete who can move around pretty well. And probably, I think if he could stay healthy, I think you could find a role for him, on this team. It just didn't seem like it was happening here. So hopefully he gets a chance at James Madison. Number 8 is Vincent Davis, and I feel bad about putting Davis this low. I actually had him 9 and then put Kai Wright there instead and move Vincent Davis up to number 8 in terms of guys that they're going to miss the most. And I feel bad because he was a great kid. I think he gave everything he had to this program. I think sometimes this program didn't do right by him, but I think he tried as hard as he could. He gave everything he could. He did everything he could, and now he's transferred. I think he went to UNLV also. Yeah, he did. I just don't think it's a huge loss because I kind of like their running back depth right now. I think they're still lacking that sort of home run hitter, and maybe Vincent Davis could have brought that element, but I think they'll be fine with Rodney Hammond, with Sebo Flemister, with Derek Davis. I'm kind of looking at Flemister and possibly Davis as being that home run hitter. TJ Harvison already here as a freshman. Montrevious Lloyd enrolling as a freshman in the summer. I think they're fine at running back. Honestly, I don't think they lost a lot. They obviously lost a lot with Izzy Abanikanda, but I think they've got some talented players, and I think they'll be okay at running back. So I just don't see a huge loss there with Vincent Davis. Number 7, Khalil Anderson. Anderson never played. Anderson never made any contributions. He moved to safety, and that's probably, part of the reason I put him as high as 7 on this list is because I still have a soft spot, in my heart for him of thinking of what he was going to be. I thought he was going to be a stud. I thought he was going to play as a freshman. I thought he was going to be a big-time defensive back in this defense. I thought he was a guy who would make a lot of plays and be really, really good as a corner or even move to safety. He ultimately did move to safety. I have my own sort of personal bias because it didn't work out with him. But I also think they could use some more safeties. I like the group they've got. I like Javon McIntyre. I like Stephon Hall. Donovan McMillan's a good player. PJ O'Brien. But having another guy who's been around for a few years in the mix there to compete with those guys, I think would be a good thing. That's why I have Judson Towner ranked up here, even higher than Anderson. Just a veteran guy who's been around for a little bit to add a little bit of experience and leadership to the safety room. And so that's why I put, Anderson here. I also still think he can be really good. He went to East Tennessee. I think, if he can stay healthy and get on the field, I think he's going to be I still believe in his potential. We'll see if he can do it at East Tennessee. Number 6, a guy I struggle with is John Morgan, who transferred to Arkansas. John Morgan, trying to think of the best way to put this. He just didn't really produce. He just didn't really produce during his college career. And he played a lot. 2018, he was a freshman, but he played a lot in 2019, 20, 21, and 20. He played a lot over the course of 4 years and doesn't really have that much production to show for it. He stayed healthy. He played in almost every game, I would say. It's not like Haba Baldonado where he missed a bunch of time due to injury. He was out there. He was playing a lot, and he just wasn't producing. And he was a guy that you kept waiting for him to have that big breakout season. You kept waiting for him to have that big year where he really just blew up for like 10 sacks or 8 sacks or 9 sacks or something. And he just, perennially a 4 to 5.5 sack guy. It was just, that's who he was. He just wasn't that productive of a player. And, we've talked about this a million times about the defensive end situation that ultimately a guy like John Morgan probably needed to leave in order for Pitt to hold on to some of the younger defensive ends who've been waiting their turn and ready to go. And I think the coaches are excited about getting to, turning the page and getting those new young defensive ends, what they call themselves, the new era of QBK or something like that. But I think the coaches are excited about getting those guys out there. And I think those young guys are excited about getting out there. And if someone like John Morgan comes back to eat up a bunch of more snaps, again, to play another 500 snaps or something, younger guys like Nakai Johnson or Sam Okunlola might say, like, man, I got to go because I want to play. And I don't want to sit behind this guy again. And so Morgan might not have been very productive. He certainly has more experience than Johnson or Okunlola or Bambrima or any of these guys who are going to step into primary roles. But I think there's good depth. I think there's good talent, and I think there's good potential at the defensive end spot. So I don't think they're going to miss him that much because, again, he didn't really produce that much to begin with. So I put him at 6th on this list. I actually debated having him lower. That Pitt would miss him even less than that, but 6 seems like a good midpoint. Number 5, I put Justin Tallender. Again, not because the guy was necessarily productive, but he played a decent amount as a backup boundary safety behind Brandon Hill. Although he got passed in that role by Javon McIntyre late in the season. But having another veteran guy, having another veteran safety, even if he wouldn't be a starter, wouldn't be a bad thing, I think. So, even though I think his ceiling is probably lower than McIntyre or Hall or some of these other safeties we're talking about, I think they could stand to have another guy who knows the defense well. He's been in it for 5 or 6 years and could serve as a bit of a leader in the safety room, even if he's not playing as much as some of those younger guys. So you never know how that dynamic would work out, but I kind of feel like he'll be missed in that regard, if not for what he does on the field, which I think if he was called upon in a backup situation, he could probably contribute well, I would think. Number 4, I have Miles Alston. Again, not because Alston really did that much at Pitt, not because Alston had made that many big plays or made that big of an impact, just because I think he could have been a quality backup. And this receiving core, as we've talked about, we talked a lot about yesterday, and we've talked a lot about since spring camp or throughout spring camp, this receiving core lacks depth. I mean, they've got their top 3 guys in Kanate Mumfield and Bub Means and Dejon Reynolds, but they need something else. I mean, that's why they're trying to get transfer wide receivers. That's why they're going to be counting on the freshmen this year. Having Alston, who would be a third-year player this year, to be your 4th or 5th or even 6th receiver, I think would be good. We'll get to the season. We'll look at what the depth chart looks like and see how they're rolling guys out there. And we'll look at where the 4th, 5th, and 6th receiver is and say, okay, is there one of these 3 guys? You have your top 3, you have your next 3. If you look in that second group of 3, and you say, is there one of these 3 guys that Miles Alston would be ahead of? And if you find 1 or 2 of them, then it's a loss, because he could have made your group overall better if he had stuck around. But I'm all for turning over a new leaf in the receiver room. I'm all for using some of the freshmen, obviously, and getting those guys on the field and seeing what they can do. In addition to getting a transfer or 2 to help fill out the top end of that. But I think they'll miss Miles Alston just as a depth piece, as a backup. He's going to Old Dominion, is where he's transferring to. Number 3, and this is sort of a similar guy to Alston, I just put him a little bit higher because I think he's more talented, is Jalen Barden. Barden is going to, I think it's Georgia Southern. I just had the page open and I closed it. Yeah, Georgia Southern. And Jalen Barden was a guy who just couldn't get on the field. And whether it was his knowledge of the offense, his reliability in route running, or knowing what he's supposed to be doing, I don't know what the issue was. I think it's probably a combination of a lot of factors. But in those brief moments where he was given an opportunity, the guy made plays. I mean, he made some big catches. He obviously has speed. He's a good football player. I hope he's able to get into a system that works for him at Georgia Southern. I hope he's able to have success at Georgia Southern because I think he's a great kid and I think he's really talented. I think he's got a lot of physical skills, and good tools to work with. He just needs to master his position, and I think he can make a lot of plays. And I think they'll miss him sort of in the same way I said about Miles Alston. You look at, when we get to the season, we see how they're playing guys. You look at the receivers 1 through 6 and say, is Jalen Barden better than number 6? Is he better than number 5? Is he better than number 4? If the answer is yes to any of those, then you say, okay, it's a loss because he would make the group better. Number 2, I mean, if you're kind of keeping track here and thinking about it and paying attention, there's only 2 guys left. So it's a matter of who I put number 2 as the player they'll miss the second most, and who I put as number 1, the player they'll miss the most. And for number 2, is there a drum roll? Do we have a drum roll? Who am I looking at? There's no producer over there. I looked over there like, do we have a drum roll? Jimmy, cue the drum roll. Kedon Slovis. And say what you will about Kedon Slovis, say what you will about Phil Dracovic, say what you will about Christian Bear, say what you will about Nate Yarnell, say what you will about any of the quarterback options that Pitt has available this season. They'll miss Kedon Slovis if, for nothing else than having a veteran, experienced backup. Worst case scenario, he's your number 2 quarterback who knows the offense and is familiar with the personnel and can be the backup to Phil Dracovic. In best case scenario, Dracovic pushes Slovis. Slovis is much better in his second year running the offense, much better second year playing with these guys. And he gives you a really experienced backup. Like I say, if nothing else. Worst case scenario gives you a really experienced backup. He's got more experience, more playing time, more passes thrown, more touchdowns, and all that than Nate Yarnell and Christian Bear combined. So if you went into spring with a competition between Dracovic and Slovis, I think you would end up with a pretty good situation of one of those guys elevating his play to win the starting job and the other one being a competent backup. And more than competent, experienced. Somebody who knows the offense, knows the players around him, the personnel, and knows and has been around, has played. So I think they'll miss him the most. There's a general conclusion, an overarching theme to this as we work through 12 down to 1, and the fact that we have Kedon Slovis at number 2 is probably illustrative of it, as is number 1, Jaden Bradley. And I put Jaden Bradley here at number 1. Look, he was not without his issues. I mean, when a guy leaves a team at midseason, there's a lot you can read into it, and most of it is probably a safe assumption. I think a lot of the assumptions you would make about why a guy leaves at midseason, those assumptions are probably safe. But Bradley was a really talented wide receiver, a really talented player, one of the most talented players, one of the most talented receivers they had last season. Which again probably speaks to it sort of hammers the point home even more when you see a guy leave midseason and he's one of the most talented receivers on the team. I think he could have been really good if he could put his head down and just work and take to coaching. I think he could have been really, really good. And he transferred to where did he go? Charlotte. I think same thing. If he puts his head down, he takes the coaching and really puts in the work, I think he can be really good. And so they'll miss him, I think, in that regard. That, for as much as we talk about the receiver room, how we talk about the lack of depth, how we talk about maybe questions about top-end talent and that high-end, do they have an upper-tier talented receiver? It remains to be seen. Do they have 2 of them? Do they have 3 of them? Do they have 4 of them? I don't think so. I don't think you can go as far as 4 to say 4 upper-end, high-end talented receivers. Bradley, I think, could fit into that group. Again, if he met certain expectations from the coaches, which he obviously wasn't, which leads to a mid-season transfer. But I think the best version of Jaden Bradley is what they will miss the most from this list of transfers. Now, whether or not they would actually get that best version of Jaden Bradley, that would have been anyone's guess. Hopefully Charlotte gets it. And hopefully he is able to be the player that he can be down there. But he's probably who I would put at the top. Now, when you put all of that together, I think the clear conclusion is they didn't lose that much. I mean, we're talking about guys who, I'm into the top 3, top 2, and I'm saying, if nothing else, he just provides a good backup. They lost 1 starter. I mean, 2 if you want to count John Morgan, but I mean, Kedon Slovis, starting punter, but they have better options. Better options emerged this spring than Sam Vanderhaar. Bradley and Barden maybe be starters, maybe be second team. Alston wasn't a starter. Tallender wasn't a starter. Anderson wasn't a starter. Vincent Davis wasn't a starter. Kai Wright wasn't a starter. Sam Williams and Gavin Todd. I mean, they didn't lose. They lost 1 starter, and it was the quarterback. And maybe 1 or 2 starter potential starters for this year in Slovis and Jaden Bradley. So I guess that's the big picture of it, is that they really didn't lose that much. Not only were the numbers low, but the quality wasn't all that high either. So pretty, I think it's interesting to look at that, to look at who they lost, what roles they played, and what roles they were likely to play this season, because I think it adds some relevant context when you're talking about the transfer portal and the players who were lost. All right, that's it for today. Tomorrow we have the Morning Pitt mailbag. If you want to get your questions in, go to the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. You can ask your questions in that thread. I have a mailbag thread right there on the Between Fifth and Forbes premium message board. You can put your questions in there. We'll get to all of those, or as many as we can, on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. Until then, I hope you've had a great week so far. Make sure you check out Panther-Lair.com, like this video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I hope you have a great Thursday. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.